The trade deadline has come and passed.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The trade deadline has officially concluded. It was a very busy and active day. Lots of trades went down, and the Royals were one of those teams that did not wait around in getting some deals done. This is what today's entire episode is going to be dedicated to, who those players were, what they gave up, and what their role is going to be for the 2024 Kansas City Royals, and what the role could be next year, the year after that, for at least one player that Kansas City acquired. So let's kick things off with how today transpired. What I think was the feeling, the gut feeling that I had going into today was that the Royals were going to acquire at minimum one person, but I had a hunch that it was going to be two, just from what had been said, what had been heard over the last handful of weeks. The Royals were going to use today as their go-all-in day, and not for the season, but to make these trades happen. They were going to find a way to make sure those deals got done. And for probably, I would say, a month or two, we had known that the Royals were going to be aggressive in getting another bullpen arm. We knew they were going to be aggressive in trying to find a bat, maybe not the bat that we thought would make the most sense. But as we had discussed yesterday on the episode, and I've now brought it up, this will be the third time I brought it up, but being at 810 WHB, you get the chance to meet and hang out with a lot of the hosts that you may listen to on a daily basis. And Steven St. John over with his show of A New Day with SSJ had Buster Olney on. And you've heard me say this many a times now, that the league had felt like the Royals had targeted some guys and they were going to get those guys they targeted. And who they acquired in total, Hunter Harvey, Michael Lorenzen, Lucas Ursig, and Paul Dejong, all were very affordable, right? The Royals were not shooting for the moon. We saw what Tanner Scott brought back for the Marlins, and that was quite a haul, and they had probably the best selling deadline that I had seen in a long time. They did what the White Sox should have been doing. But the White Sox didn't really get any talent at the trade deadline, and now they've hung on to guys that may or may not be great next year or may not be moved in the winter. Who really knows what Chris Getz is thinking over in Chicago? But at least the Royals and the White Sox were able to get one deal done to give Kansas City a little power, a little pop off the bench. But as the hours rolled on, I never really got this sense of panic or that they weren't going to do anything. I felt pretty confident the Royals were going to get a move done just because of who was still out there. I think Luis Rengifo made a lot of sense. I think Taylor Ward made a lot of sense for the Royals. But the Angels held on to both of them. And I think that is a misconception at time at the trade deadline. And I think I have been led on a few times with this. But if a player has club control, that does not mean that you have to trade him at the trade deadline. Just because they're a hot trade chip doesn't mean you have to do it now. They very well could wait till the winter, and maybe the Royals being interested in some of those guys, and Taylor Ward and Luis Rengifo, you can revisit that in the winter. If the Royals leadoff spot and the production doesn't improve, I think the Royals could always go back to the Angels in the offseason and say, hey, what's the price now on Luis Rengifo? What's the price now on Taylor Ward? Because Taylor Ward would be going into a contract here. The price probably comes down a little bit because you're not just paying for a year and a half of Taylor Ward. You're paying for just 1 year at that point in time. But again, all of that is speculation, and that's for months down the road. What the Royals got in their first deal, being Lucas Ursig, I thought was a home run deal for them. Lucas Ursig was somebody, because of the years of control, which was 5 in total, the Royals could have him for a very long time. I thought they were going to have to give up one of their untouchable guys. And J.J. Picollo had been very vocal about telling teams, these guys are off the table, but who else do you like? And they get that deal done with Oakland and just giving up Mason Barnett and giving up Will Klein, who was in Kansas City last night, and Jared Dickey, who was taken in last year's draft class. I thought the return was more than fair. In fact, I would put it in favor of Kansas City because of what Lucas Ursig does to their bullpen. And we'll talk about this more so in the second segment, but also what he means moving forward for this team, how you can go into the offseason and try to assemble your bullpen. I think Lucas Ursig becomes the Royals closer. But again, that's going to be talked about here in about 4 to 5 minutes. That deal happened, and I thought the Royals were going to have to give up a haul just because of the years of control there. I mean, we saw what A.J. Puck was worth when Arizona traded for him, and Miami got a lot of prospects in return, and some big-time prospects at that. A.J. Puck is younger than Lucas Ursig, but still a reliever with multiple years of control seemed to be a pretty hefty price at the deadline. But that did not force J.J. Piccolo into an uncomfortable position. I think that he felt pretty confident a deal like that could get done. He had mentioned that they had been working on the deal for the last couple weeks, and they gave up 3 prospects, and yes, one of them inside their top 5, but we've said this before on the show, and I'm going to reiterate it. The Royals' top 5s are not top 5s in other organizations. And I got asked this on YouTube the other day. What do I mean by saying, bottom 5 system? How do the Royals have a bottom system if they've been losing so much of late? Well, missed draft picks. Simple as that. Not hitting on first rounders. Guys that haven't developed properly. Guys that have taken more time. They should have had a higher ranking farm system at this point, but they didn't draft that well from 2018, 2019, 2020, and so on and so forth. More so, I think, from not drafting well when the Royals were competing for American League pennants. That was a true crusher when it gets down to it. They still hit on Bobby Wood Jr. in 19. They like Blake Mitchell a lot. They like Gavin Cross now. Yes, they missed on Asa Lacy, but a lot of people missed on their prospects back in 2020. But who they gave up, I mean, I like the prospects. I liked Mason Barnett. Was I overly confident he was going to be a frontline starting pitcher? No. I thought it would be kind of a stretch that he would crack a top 3 in the rotation, could get some starts as a number 4 or number 5. I liked Will Klein a lot, but he's also a reliever, and you got a much better reliever in return, and a guy that can close out games. Jared Dickey was so early into his big league career, I don't think you really know what he could become. He wasn't ranked inside the top 30, so all things considered, I think a very good deal for Kansas City, and they solve a glaring issue in the back end of their bullpen, and now they add their hardest thrower into the bullpen as Ursig sits about 98.5 with his fastball. Paul Dejong is a little bit more of an interesting pickup. It didn't cost the Royals barely anything. It was a lottery ticket throw-in. What I mean by that with a lottery ticket guy, you're talking about the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds in your very lower part of the farm system that have barely had a chance to pitch professionally. Now, Rosado, the kid they'd sent over for Paul Dejong, was pitching well in low A Columbia, but he also was a little bit older for that level. I think he had just turned 22. That's usually a level for guys that are anywhere from 19 to 20 to 21. So he had pitched the majority of the year as a 21-year-old, but still on the older end of what that level of ball represents. Paul Dejong, though, is not a superstar. He has not been particularly great for Chicago, but because of what the Royals gave up for Lucas Ursig, I think that this was the next best affordable option. Somebody they were looking at. Paul Dejong has 18 home runs this year, so there is significant pop there. He, I think, jumps into 3rd for home runs among Royals now. So he's right behind Salvador Perez and right behind Bobby Wood Jr. He has some pop in his bat. He's not the best defender. He doesn't walk much. Again, the overall numbers aren't going to seriously impress you, but they wanted the right-handed bat. J.J. Piccolo was vocal about it. They gave up 3 prospects to bring in their closer, and then they add an extra bat, and they option Nick Lofton in doing so. I believe Paul Dejong is a better offensive threat than Garrett Hampson and Nick Lofton. So you do get a little better in that department,